I'm Ethan, I'm 34 years old, and I discovered my own parents, the two people who were supposed to protect me, had been systematically stealing from me for my entire adult life, turning my financial future into a ticking time bomb. But before I tell you about the moment I confronted them with a single folder that blew their world apart, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always good to know you're not alone. For me, the beginning of the end started on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other, gray and overcast in Ohio, the kind of day that doesn't promise much and usually delivers even less. I was a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm downtown. I wasn't a superstar, just competent, quiet, and deeply reliable. For the past year, I had been the lead analyst on the McGowan account, a complex portfolio I had untangled and turned profitable. It was my baby, and it was the reason I was up for a promotion to senior analyst, a position I'd been working toward for 3 solid years. It meant a corner office, or at least a cubicle with a window, and a pay bump that would have finally allowed me to start seriously saving for a down payment on a house. I walked into my boss's office, a man named Henderson, feeling a quiet hum of confidence. I'd rehearsed my thank you speech in my head. He didn't ask me to sit down. That was the first crack in the perfect facade of my day. "Ethan," he said, his eyes fixed on a manila folder on his desk, avoiding mine completely. He had a nervous habit of tapping his pen, and right then, it was tap-tap-tapping against the wood like a tiny, anxious drum. "Regarding the senior analyst position, we've decided to go in a different direction." The hum of confidence died, replaced by a deafening silence in my ears. "Oh," I managed, my voice sounding distant. "I see. Can I ask why?" "I thought the McGowan account's performance was—" "Your performance is excellent, Ethan. Top-notch." He cut in, finally looking up. His eyes were full of that corporate pity I'd come to despise. It's a look that says, "This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you," which is always a lie. "Look, this is awkward." During the final vetting process, a flag came up. A major red flag on your personal credit report. The position requires a high level of financial integrity, a security clearance of sorts, and, well, your numbers are a disaster. I'm sorry, my hands are tied. A disaster? The word didn't compute. I felt a hot wave of shame wash over me, so intense it was dizzying. It's a unique kind of humiliation, being accused of something you know you didn't do. I wanted to defend myself, to shout that there must be a mistake, but my throat closed up. I just stood there, nodding like an idiot, as he mumbled something about other opportunities down the line. I walked out of his office in a daze, the muffled sound of office chatter seeming to mock me. That weekend was my mom's birthday, which meant the obligatory family gathering. My family consists of my parents, Charles and Margaret, my older brother, Jake, and my younger sister, Emily. To them, I was steady Ethan, the reliable one, the boring one, the one who always showed up, always helped out when they needed a loan, and never made any waves. The party was at their house, the house I grew up in. The air was thick with the smell of my mom's pot roast and forced cheer. My dad, Charles, clapped me on the back, his expensive Swiss watch glinting under the light. "There he is, the money man," he boomed, his voice a little too loud. Jake, who was 38 and lived a life funded by what he called parental investments, smirked at me from his throne on the couch. "Heard you got passed over for the big promotion. Bro, tough break. Maybe you should learn to take more risks like me." My sister Emily, ever the diplomat, gave me a hug that felt more like a brief pat. "Don't listen to him, Ethan," she whispered. "We're all so proud of you for trying." I just smiled. It was the armor I'd learned to wear. Later, I went to the kitchen to get a beer. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard my parents' voices. They were talking with my Uncle George, my dad's older, quieter brother. I paused, not meaning to eavesdrop, but then I heard my name, and I froze. He was so disappointed about not getting that promotion. "My mom, Margaret," said with a sigh that was pure theater. "He just doesn't have that killer instinct, I suppose." Then my dad laughed. It was a low, rumbling sound, full of liquor and a casual cruelty that chilled me to the bone. "Killer instinct? He's too stupid to realize we've been stealing from him for years," he slurred. just loud enough for me to hear every single word. His credit is in the toilet because of us. That's why he didn't get the job. He just keeps his head down and works, and we get to enjoy life. God, we raised a fool. My mom giggled. A light, tinkling sound that had always sounded like music to me. Now it sounded like breaking glass. Oh, Charles, don't be so mean. He's a good boy. A good, gullible boy. That trip to Italy last year? All on his dime. And Emily's new car? That wellness retreat she wants to go on next month? Thank you, Ethan. The bottle in my hand felt slick with sweat. My heart wasn't racing. It just stopped. It was like the world narrowed to a single, dark tunnel. And at the end of it were the voices of my own parents, casually dissecting my life and laughing. I backed away from the door without a sound. I walked through the living room, past my jeering brother and my smiling sister, their faces now looking grotesque and alien. I walked out the front door into the cold night air. On the silent drive home, the rain started to fall, smearing the streetlights into long, blurry streaks. I didn't turn on the wipers. I just stared ahead, a cold, terrifying clarity forming in my mind. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a declaration of war. And they had no idea I was finally ready to fight back. The night after the party, I didn't sleep. Sleep was an impossible luxury. I just sat in the dark of my small apartment, the city lights painting sterile stripes across the floor, and let the numbness wash over me. The anger I expected to feel, that righteous, cinematic rage, wasn't there. In its place was a hollow, echoing void. My dad's words, "We raised a fool," played on a loop in my head, each repetition chipping away at my sense of self. Had I been a fool? For my whole life, I'd accepted the family dynamic as an unchangeable law of nature. Jake was the golden child, the charismatic screw-up who could do no wrong, even when he failed at everything he tried. Emily was the princess, doted on and delicate, her every whim catered to with a gentle sigh and an open wallet. My wallet, apparently. And I was Ethan, the workhorse, the background character in my own family's story, the steady foundation they all stood on, never realizing they were drilling holes in it all along. I always thought their preference for my siblings was just how things were, a quirk of parental affection. I never imagined it was rooted in such profound, malicious contempt. The next morning, fueled by a pot of coffee so strong it made my hands shake, I sat down at my computer. As a financial analyst, I looked at numbers all day. I could find meaning in the complex dance of debits and credits. But I had never, ever wanted to look at a set of numbers less than my own. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I finally logged into a major credit monitoring service. The page loaded. The progress bar felt like a fuse burning down. Then, the screen popped into focus, and the breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just bad. It was a post-apocalyptic wasteland. My credit score, which I'd painstakingly kept near 800, was a shocking 582. A score that screamed, irresponsible, high risk, failure. And then I saw the list of accounts under my name. My heart hammered against my ribs. There were 3 credit cards I'd never heard of. One from Capital One, one from Chase, one from Discover. Each one was a gaping wound of debt, all maxed out. The total was over $50,000. My hands trembling, I clicked on the transaction history for one of them. The page was a litany of my family's greatest hits, a highlight reel of their lives, paid for by mine. There it was, a $5,000 charge at the Seaside Villas Resort in Florida from last winter. I remembered that trip vividly. They had all gone, a last-minute family getaway. I couldn't go because of a major deadline on the McGowan account. They'd sent me a postcard, a picture of a perfect white sand beach. "Wish you were here," it said in my mom's looping script. Underneath, she had added, "Jake needed a break. Poor thing. He's been so stressed." I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. He'd needed a break, and I had unknowingly footed the bill. I kept scrolling. Another charge, $2,500 at a high-end electronics store. That lined up perfectly with the massive 75-inch 4K flat-screen TV my dad had bragged about getting for the Super Bowl. He clapped me on the back and told me, "Son, I got a killer deal. You gotta know how to play the game." He was playing a game, all right. I just didn't know I was the prize. Then I saw it. A recurring charge that made my stomach clench. A monthly payment of $650 to Lexus Financial Services. I scrolled back. It had been happening for 2 years. 2 years. I did the math in my head, my analyst brain taking over for a second to shield me from the emotion. $15,600. I pulled up my sister Emily's Instagram on my phone, my thumb swiping numbly through her curated life. And there it was, a photo of her from 2 years ago, beaming in front of a brand new white Lexus, a giant red bow on the hood like a bloody wound. The caption was almost comically cruel. "My parents are the most generous people in the world. I'm so lucky to have a family that supports my dreams. Hashtag blessed, hashtag new car, hashtag family first, hashtag best parents ever." I leaned back in my chair, the computer screen blurring in front of me. Each transaction was a memory, a moment where I'd felt a pang of being left out, a twinge of being overlooked, but had brushed it off as me being too sensitive. Now, those moments were reframed, painted in the ugly, glaring colors of calculated theft and deep-seated deceit. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen my memories, twisting them into something sick and parasitic. They had made me a stranger in my own life. I knew I couldn't do this alone. My hands were shaking too hard to even hold my coffee mug steady. I tried to go online to dispute one of the charges, a formality. I was met with a brick wall of automated systems. "Please enter the 3-digit security code on the back of your card. Please answer your security question. What was the name of your first pet?" I didn't have the card. I didn't know the answers. I was locked out of my own fraudulent life. I picked up my phone and called the only person I knew I could trust completely. My best friend, Daryl. Daryl and I had been friends since our freshman year of college. He was the opposite of me in many ways, loud, opinionated, and had a built-in bullshit detector that was second to none. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey man, burning the midnight oil." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Just a choked, ragged sound, the noise of a man breaking. "Ethan? You there? What's wrong?" His voice sharpened instantly with concern. They've been stealing from me, Daryl," I finally whispered, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "All of them. My whole life." There was a moment of charged silence on the other end of the line, and then a string of curses that was both eloquent and deeply satisfying. "I knew it," he finally growled, his voice a low rumble of vindicated fury. "I freaking knew it, Ethan. I've been telling you for a decade. Remember that time your dad borrowed $5,000 for that can't-miss real estate investment that went bust? I told you it smelled wrong. Remember when Emily needed help with her rent for that ridiculously expensive downtown apartment because her roommate bailed? I told you to get it in writing." He sighed, a heavy, frustrated sound. "Man, I'm sorry. I should have pushed you harder. What did you find?" I spent the next hour walking him through everything, my voice flat and robotic as I listed off the cards, the debts, the vacations, the car. Daryl didn't interrupt. He just listened, the occasional sharp intake of breath the only sound on his end. When I was done, the silence stretched for a moment. "Okay," he said, his voice now calm and dangerously focused. "Okay, Ethan, this is a 5-alarm fire, but we're going to put it out. First things first, you need to call all 3 credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, and put a fraud alert and a credit freeze on your file. Right now. That stops them from opening anything else. Then you need to print everything. Every statement, every transaction, every web page. We need a paper trail so thick it'll choke a horse." "What's the point, Daryl?" I asked, the hopelessness creeping back in like a cold tide. "I confront them, they'll deny it. They'll gaslight me. They'll turn it around and make me the bad guy, the ungrateful son who's tearing the family apart over a little money." "No," Daryl said, his voice firm as bedrock. "First, this isn't a little money. This is grand larceny. Second, you're not going to just confront them. You're going to bury them. This isn't a family argument, Ethan. This is a crime, and we're gonna treat it like one. Don't just check the credit cards, man. Check for loans. Car loans, personal loans, anything. They got this bold. There's no telling how deep it goes. His certainty was an anchor in my sea of confusion and shame. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was a cold, hard ember of anger, and Daryl was fanning it into a flame. That night, I did as he said. I sat at my dining table, the printer humming relentlessly as it spat out page after page of my family's betrayal. The pile grew into a small mountain of evidence, a monument to their greed. With every page, I felt a layer of my old self, the compliant, quiet, accommodating Ethan, being burned away. I was so focused on the credit cards that I almost missed it. Following Daryl's advice, I ran a more comprehensive check, one that included loan applications. And there it was, tucked away under the loan section of my full report. There was my legitimate car loan, my old student loans that I'd paid off years ago, and one other, a commercial business loan, a $60,000 commercial business loan, taken out 18 months ago from Three Rivers Regional Bank. My blood ran cold. This was different. This wasn't a vacation or a TV or even a luxury car. This was a massive, life-altering amount of money. What in God's name had they done? Who had this money? Jake's business opportunities? My dad's investments? I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of the table. I stumbled to the bathroom and leaned over the sink, splashing cold water on my face. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back was pale and drawn, the eyes wide with a new, more primal kind of fear. This wasn't just about being a fool anymore. This was about being utterly and completely ruined. My name was tied to a failing business I knew nothing about. I went back to the table and stared at the name of the bank. Three Rivers Regional Bank. I had to know. I had to know everything. I picked up the phone. I knew I needed help, but not just from Daryl. I needed someone who understood the system, someone who could look at this labyrinthine mess and see the patterns, see the intent. My mind landed on a name, Karen Preston. Not the same Preston as the lawyer Daryl would later recommend, just a coincidence. She was a senior analyst, the analyst who got the position I was supposed to get. But she was more than that. She was a forensic accounting genius. Her nickname in the office was the Wolf, because she could sniff out financial rot from a mile away. Getting her involved was a huge risk. It was personal, messy, and deeply unprofessional. But looking at that $60,000 loan, a loan that could bankrupt me and follow me for the rest of my life, I knew I didn't have a choice. This had gone far beyond what I could handle alone. This required a wolf. The next morning, I walked into the office with a knot of dread twisted so tightly in my stomach it felt like a physical object. Approaching Karen felt like preparing to jump off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. She was a professional acquaintance, not a friend. We exchanged polite, sterile greetings at the coffee machine and sat in the same departmental meetings, but that was the extent of our relationship. She was in her early 40s, sharp, impeccably dressed, and radiated an aura of intense competence that was both admirable and deeply intimidating. Asking her to wade into my personal dirty laundry felt like a massive, career-ending overstep. I found her at her desk, already laser-focused on a multi-tab spreadsheet that looked like an alien language to most people. For a moment, I almost turned back. Then I thought about that $60,000 loan, and I forced my feet to move forward. "Karen," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up, her expression neutral, but her eyes were sharp, analytical. They missed nothing. "Ethan, everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath, my heart hammering. "I need your help," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "It's personal, but it requires your professional expertise. I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't the most serious thing that's ever happened to me." She studied my face for a long moment, her head tilted slightly. I could see the mental calculation in her eyes, the weighing of professional boundaries against human curiosity. "This is about the promotion, isn't it?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "The credit flag." I just nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. I couldn't speak. Okay, she said after a pause that felt like an eternity. Let's go to the small conference room. HR isn't in yet. And bring whatever you have. For the next hour, in that sterile, windowless room, I laid it all out. The credit reports, the bank statements, the shocking discovery of the business loan. I didn't get emotional. I channeled my analyst persona, presenting the data points, the timelines, the figures. I was a man describing a plane crash he had somehow survived. Karen listened intently, her eyes scanning the pages with incredible speed. She didn't say a word, just absorbed the information, her expression hardening with every new piece of evidence. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a low, slow whistle. Wow, she said, her voice a mixture of shock and professional awe. This isn't just a case of your parents using your credit cards for a vacation, Ethan. This is sophisticated. Look here. She pulled one of the statements closer and pointed to a series of transactions. They're layering, moving small amounts of money between different accounts to make it harder to track. They pay one card off with another, then take a cash advance. This isn't amateur hour. Whoever is driving this has a basic, if sloppy, understanding of how to hide their tracks. Then her eyes landed on the printout for the business loan. She picked it up, her focus narrowing. This is the big one, she said, her tone grim. This is the endgame. They would have needed to forge your signature on a dozen documents for this. Your social security number, a copy of your driver's license, probably even fake pay stubs. This is major, premeditated fraud. Identity theft, pure and simple. She looked at me, her expression deadly serious. I need to be very clear with you, Ethan. Are you prepared for where this road leads? This isn't something that ends with a family argument and a tearful apology over Thanksgiving dinner. This could end with them in jail. Her question hung in the air, heavy and cold. Jail. My own parents. The thought was horrifying, a violation of the natural order of things. But what was the alternative? To let them get away with it? To let them completely destroy the future I had worked so hard to build, and then laugh about it over pot roast? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I am. A look of respect, even admiration, flickered in Karen's eyes. All right, she said, a new energy in her voice. I'm in. Give me a couple of days. I have a friend who is a VP of risk management at Three Rivers Regional. I'll make a quiet inquiry, analyst to analyst. No official alarms, just a professional courtesy call to see what I can find out about this loan. In the meantime, she said, her expression turning stern, you need a lawyer, not a family friend who handles wills and real estate. You need a shark. A litigator who eats people like your family for breakfast. A shark. The word felt foreign and aggressive, but I knew she was right. I wasn't the same person I was a week ago. The old Ethan would have wanted a mediator. The new Ethan wanted a weapon. That evening, I met Daryl at a quiet, dark bar, the kind of place where you could have a serious conversation without being overheard. I told him everything that had happened with Karen. A shark, Daryl repeated, nodding in grim approval. She's 100% right. You can't go into a gunfight with a puppy. I actually know a guy, Tom Preston. He handled my uncle's messy business divorce a few years back. The other guy tried to hide assets, play dirty. Tom didn't just win the case, he had the other guy sanctioned by the court for perjury. He's brutal, but he's the best. Daryl made the call right then and there, and I had a consultation with Tom Preston the next afternoon. Tom's office was on the 40th floor of the tallest building downtown, a cathedral of glass and steel and minimalist black leather furniture. It was a space designed to communicate power and intimidate opposition. Tom himself was in his late 40s, dressed in a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it was sewn onto him. He had cold, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you, assessing your weaknesses. I laid out the same story, the same pile of documents I had shown Karen. He reviewed them in absolute silence, his face an unreadable mask of professional detachment. When he was done, he didn't offer sympathy. He steepled his fingers and looked at me, his gaze piercing. Before we discuss strategy, I need to know something, Ethan. Are you prepared for this? And I mean really prepared? Are you prepared for your mother to cry on the witness stand and tell a jury you're a cruel, ungrateful son? Are you prepared for your siblings to go on social media and paint you as a monster who is trying to destroy his own family over money? Are you prepared for your extended family to shun you at holidays for the rest of your life? Because all of that will happen. I've seen it 100 times. He was testing me. He was trying to see if I would flinch. I thought of Henderson's pitying eyes, Jake's smirk, my mother's giggle. Yes, I said. I am. He nodded, a flicker of approval in his cold eyes. Good, because sentiment is a liability in these situations. Now, your colleague Karen is correct. This is a clear case of felony-level fraud. We could go to the police right now. An investigation would be launched, arrests would likely be made. But a criminal case is out of our hands. It's messy, unpredictable, and the outcome is up to a DA who has 100 other cases. He leaned forward. I propose a different strategy, a more controlled demolition. We operate from a position of absolute strength. We will use the threat of a criminal case as leverage to win a civil one. First, we prepare a comprehensive civil complaint. We detail every fraudulent charge, every forged document. Then, we prepare an ironclad pre-litigation settlement offer. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Tom said, a faint predatory smile touching his lips, that we package this mountain of evidence into an airtight case. We prepare the lawsuit down to the last detail. And then you present them with an ultimatum. They either agree to our terms, a full signed confession, a legally binding repayment plan that will be financially crippling for them, and a permanent no-contact order, or we file the lawsuit and the criminal complaint the next morning, and they can explain their actions to a judge and the police. The strategy was brilliant. It was aggressive, clean, and it put the power squarely and terrifyingly in my hands. It wasn't about sending them to prison, not primarily. It was about justice. It was about getting my life back and ensuring they could never touch it again. Okay, I said, my voice firm. Let's do that. What's the retainer? He named a figure that made me inwardly wince, but I just nodded. Justice, I was learning, was expensive. Good, Tom said. Now this file is strong, but it could be stronger. Financial documents are one thing. A human witness is another. Corroboration is key. Is there anyone who can place them, in their own words, admitting to this? My mind flashed back to the party. The smell of pot roast. My mother's tinkling laugh. My dad's drunken, arrogant boast. And the other person in the room, the silent witness. Yes, I said, my heart starting to pound with a new, tactical rhythm. There's one person. My Uncle George. Tom nodded slowly, the predatory smile returning for a moment. Then that's your next assignment. Go and talk to him. Don't be aggressive. Don't threaten. Just tell him your story and appeal to whatever conscience he has left. His testimony could be the final nail in their coffin. As I left Tom's office and stepped out into the afternoon sun, the city sprawling beneath me, I felt a strange sense of calm. For weeks, I had been drowning in a sea of betrayal and confusion. Now I had a plan. I had allies. I had an arsenal. The next step was perhaps the hardest one yet. I had to confront a member of my own family and ask him to help me burn the rest of it to the ground. The drive to my Uncle George's house was the longest 45 minutes of my life. The route was familiar, but everything felt different, seen through a new, cynical lens. He lived in a quiet, sleepy suburb on the other side of town, in a small brick ranch house identical to all the others on his street. He was a retired accountant, a widower, a man who had built his life around the comforting certainty of numbers and the quiet order of a well-tended garden. What I was about to ask him to do would shatter that order, dragging him into the chaotic, messy world of family warfare. He seemed genuinely surprised to see me when he opened the door, a copy of the local newspaper in his hand. "Ethan, what a surprise. What brings you all the way out here?" he asked, a little flustered. as if my unexpected presence was a disruption to his carefully managed routine. "Can I come in, Uncle George? I need to talk to you about something important." He led me into his living room, a time capsule from the 1980s. We sat on a floral-patterned sofa covered in thick, protective plastic that crinkled loudly every time I moved. The air smelled of old paper, peppermint, and the faint, dusty scent of a house lived in alone for too long. For a few excruciating minutes, we made small talk about the weather, about the progress of his tomato plants. I could feel him studying me, sensing that this wasn't just a casual visit. Finally, I couldn't take the pretense anymore. "Uncle George," I began, my voice quiet but firm. "I was at Mom's birthday party last weekend. I was in the hallway when you were talking with her and Dad in the kitchen." The polite, grandfatherly smile vanished from his face. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving his skin looking papery and thin. He wouldn't meet my eyes, choosing instead to stare intently at a dust bunny in the corner, as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. I don't recall," he mumbled, his voice suddenly weak. "Just family chatter, you know?" "Please," I said, leaning forward, the plastic crinkling under me like a scream. My voice wasn't angry. It was just tired, worn down to the nub. "Please don't lie to me. I heard what he said, what you both said, about my credit, about taking my money, about me being a fool." George just sat there, his hands twisting in his lap, the knuckles white. "He'd been drinking, Ethan. You know how your father gets when he's had a few bourbons. He boasts. He says stupid things he doesn't mean." "It wasn't stupid, and it wasn't a lie," I said, my voice hardening. I pulled a single, folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket. It was the summary of the $60,000 fraudulent business loan Karen had helped me uncover. I didn't hand it to him. I just slid it across the glass coffee table. The black ink stood out, stark and accusatory. "This is a $60,000 loan they took out in my name from Three Rivers Regional Bank. This is just one piece of the puzzle. They've destroyed my credit. They cost me my promotion. They've been doing this for years, and you know it." He stared at the paper, his hands trembling so badly he had to clasp them together. He looked like a cornered animal. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "I want you to tell the truth," I said simply. "That's all. I have a lawyer. He's preparing a case. I'm going to confront them. I just need you to corroborate what you heard. If it comes to it, I just need you to be a witness, to confirm what was said in that kitchen." He shook his head violently, a look of pure terror on his face. "Ethan, you can't ask me to do that. You can't. That's my brother, your father. This would destroy the family. It would be a catastrophe." "The family is already destroyed," I said, my voice now as cold as the glass table between us. "It was destroyed a long time ago, and I was just the last one to realize it. Uncle George, I remember when I was a kid, you used to help me with my math homework. You would sit with me for hours. You always told me, 'Ethan, the numbers don't lie. They always tell the truth if you know how to look at them.' Well, the numbers here don't lie. They tell a story of felony fraud and systematic theft. All I'm asking is for you to not lie either." I saw a flicker of something in his eyes and pressed on, a cold, tactical part of my brain taking over. "I remember a few years ago, you had some business troubles of your own. Your consulting firm almost went under. Dad said he helped you out, gave you a substantial loan to stay afloat. Did you ever wonder where that money came from? A man on a modest salary with a wife who loves luxury. That hit him. It was a calculated blow, and it landed perfectly." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. The thought had clearly crossed his mind before, a dark suspicion he'd buried deep down out of a sense of familial loyalty or willful ignorance. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not just fear in his eyes, but a deep, profound, and corrosive shame. He had been a beneficiary of my stolen future. He was silent for a full, agonizing minute. The only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. "If your lawyer calls me," he said finally, his voice barely audible, his eyes fixed on the floor, "I will tell him what I heard. I won't I won't lie. It was all I needed. I stood up. Thank you, I said, the words feeling inadequate. I left him sitting on his plastic-covered sofa in his quiet, orderly house that had just been turned upside down. On the drive back, I didn't feel triumph, just a grim sense of accomplishment. I had my witness. The last piece of the puzzle was in place. That evening, I was at Daryl's apartment, a war room now littered with printouts and legal pads. We were going through the final binder Tom's paralegal had assembled. It was a masterpiece of organized destruction. Every piece of evidence was tabbed, cross-referenced, and summarized. There was a financial breakdown by Karen that was as elegant as it was damning, a legal summary by Tom that outlined the potential criminal charges, and a draft of the ultimatum. It was thick, heavy, and felt like it weighed 100 pounds. It's a work of art, Daryl said, whistling as he flipped through a section detailing Jake's spending habits, cross-referenced with my credit card statements. A beautiful, terrifying work of art. As we were organizing the last pages, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. My stomach clenched. Hey Ethan, the message read. Mom said you seemed a little distant at the party. We're all so worried about you. I hope everything is okay. Please don't shut us out. We're family. I read the message out loud to Daryl. It was a classic move from their playbook. Preemptive love bombing. Playing the victim. It was designed to make me feel guilty, to make me question my own reality. For a second, a tiny, conditioned part of my brain flickered with doubt. Was I being too harsh? Was I blowing this out of proportion? Daryl saw the look on my face. Don't, he said firmly. Don't you dare fall for that. That's not concern. That's a spider checking its web. She's laying the groundwork for whatever they're planning to ask you for next. He was right. I deleted the text. Just then, my phone rang. The caller ID read Mom. My heart hammered. I looked at Daryl. He just nodded. Put it on speaker. I answered, my voice carefully neutral. Hello. Ethan, honey. How are you? Her voice was syrupy sweet. The voice she always used when she was about to ask for a favor. I'm fine, Mom. What's up? Oh, nothing much. I was just talking with your father, and we were thinking. It's been too long since we all got together properly. We were planning on stopping by this weekend. Maybe Sunday afternoon? And we'll bring Jake and Emily along. We just have something we want to talk to you about. A little family matter that's come up. I could almost hear the unspoken words. A little family matter that requires your wallet. The dramatic irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Here I was, holding a binder that detailed their years of criminal activity, and they were calling to set up their next shakedown. Sure, Mom, I said, my voice cold and even as stone. Sunday afternoon sounds fine. I'll be here. Wonderful. It will be so good to see you, sweetie. Love you. She hung up. I stared at the phone, my hand clenched into a white-knuckled fist. Daryl looked at me, his eyes wide with a kind of awed disbelief. They're walking right into it, he whispered. They have absolutely no idea. No, I said, placing the final, damning page into the binder and closing it with a definitive heavy thud. They don't. The trap was set. The bait was taken. All I had to do now was wait for the storm to break. Sunday arrived with a cold, gray sky that perfectly matched the ice in my veins. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment with a kind of manic, focused energy, scrubbing surfaces that were already clean, organizing things that were already in order. It was a way to keep my hands busy, to stop my mind from spinning out of control. The binder sat on my coffee table, thick and black, an ominous monolith in the center of the room. Daryl had offered to be there, to be a silent presence in the corner, but I told him no. This was a battle I had to fight alone. This was the final, painful severing of a cord, and it had to be just me and them. At precisely 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. I took one last, deep breath, my heart a steady, heavy drum against my ribs. I walked to the door and opened it. My parents, Charles and Margaret, stood there, beaming, dressed in their Sunday best. Ethan, honey, my mom said, stepping in to give me a hug that felt like being wrapped in ice. Her perfume was cloying. My dad clapped me on the shoulder. his grip a little too hard, a gesture meant to convey fatherly affection, but that only felt like an assertion of ownership. "Good to see you, son. Place is looking neat." They settled onto my couch as if they owned it, my dad immediately picking up a coaster and inspecting it for dust. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Jake and Emily. Jake sauntered in, a phone pressed to his ear, finishing up some important call. He gave my apartment a dismissive, sweeping look before plopping into my best armchair. Emily gave me a quick, airy hug that smelled of expensive perfume and entitlement. The whole happy family assembled for the slaughter. They started with small talk asking about work. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. "So, Ethan, still crunching those numbers?" my dad asked, a condescending smile on his face. "It's good you have a steady job," my mom added. "Something you can rely on." "Yeah, some of us have to create our own opportunities," Jake chimed in, finally off his phone. "It's a lot of pressure you wouldn't understand." I gave them short, non-committal answers, letting them spin their web. My dad finally cleared his throat, taking on the air of a CEO about to address his board. "Son," he began, his tone now serious and patronizing. "Your mother and I and your siblings, we've run into a bit of a cash flow problem. Nothing serious, you understand. Just a temporary setback with an investment. A deal that was a sure thing turned out to be not so sure." My mom jumped in, her face a mask of worried sincerity, her hand fluttering to her chest. "And your brother Jake, he has this wonderful new business opportunity, a real game changer in the tech space, but he needs some seed money to get it off the ground. He's so brilliant, Ethan, but the banks just don't see his vision. And my landlord is raising the rent," Emily added, her voice a plaintive whine. "It's just criminal what they're charging these days for a one-bedroom. I might have to move back home." The horror in her voice at this prospect was meant to be my call to action. They went on like this for several minutes, weaving a tapestry of lies and half-truths and manufactured crises, all designed to lead to one inevitable conclusion. They needed money. A lot of it. Finally, Jake, with his trademark impatience, cut to the chase. "Look, Ethan, what they're trying to say is we need about $75,000, he said, as casually as if he were asking for the salt. "50 for Dad's thing, 25 for my startup. We can figure out M's rent later. So you'll need to talk to your bank on Monday. $75,000. The audacity of it was so pure, so shameless. It was almost a form of art. I didn't say anything. I just stared at them, letting the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy. "Well?" Emily prompted, a little edge of annoyance in her voice. "Are you going to help your family or not? We don't have all day." I leaned forward slowly, my eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "Is this the little family matter you wanted to discuss?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My dad puffed out his chest, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. "Yes, family helps family. It's the most important rule. And it's time for you to step up and do your part." "I see," I said. I reached for the black binder on the coffee table. My movements were slow, deliberate. I placed it in front of them with a soft, definitive thud. "Then let's talk about family matters." A flicker of confusion crossed their faces. It was the first unplanned moment of their performance. My dad, with a dismissive grunt, opened the binder. The first page was a one-page summary, prepared by Tom. It listed 3 fraudulent credit cards, with the total outstanding debt of $52,841 highlighted in bright yellow. He paled. The smirk vanished. "What is this?" he stammered, his voice losing its confident boom. "Keep reading," I said. He flipped the page. It was a detailed breakdown of their trip to Italy, with copies of the hotel bills and airline tickets from my stolen credit card statement. My mom, looking over his shoulder, let out a small, sharp gasp. Jake, annoyed, snatched the binder from his father. "What is this nonsense?" He flipped through the pages faster, his smug expression melting into a mask of slack-jawed disbelief. He saw the receipts for his expensive gadgets, the down payment for his last car, the payments for Emily's Lexus. This This is some kind of joke, right? Jake said, looking up at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. You hacked our stuff? What the hell, Ethan? Does it look like I'm joking? My mom started to cry, not real tears of remorse, but the pathetic, theatrical crocodile tears she always used to get her way. Ethan, how could you? She wailed, her voice thick with fake betrayal. Spying on your own family. We were just borrowing it. We were always going to pay you back when our investments came through. My dad found his voice, and it was full of sputtering, righteous rage. This is a disgusting invasion of privacy. You have no right to this information. This is illegal. I have no right? I repeated, and for the first time, my voice rose, sharp and cracking like a whip. I have no right? You had no right to open accounts in my name. You had no right to forge my signature. You had no right to destroy my credit, to cost me my career, to steal from me every single day for years, and then stand in your kitchen and mock me for it behind my back. We were just managing your money for you, my dad yelled, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. You're not smart with it. You're too conservative. You just let it sit in a bank. We were putting it to good use for the family. We were building a legacy. The delusion was so complete, so profound, it almost made me laugh. It was the final, ugly truth. In their minds, they were the heroes of this story. I stood up, looking down at the four of them, a pathetic tableau of greed and denial. The time for lies is over, I said, my voice now cold as steel, devoid of all emotion. I pulled a single, multi-page document from my jacket pocket, the ultimatum Tom had prepared. This is a legally binding confession and a repayment agreement. It stipulates that you will repay every single cent you have stolen, which my lawyer has calculated at $187,000. That includes the $60,000 business loan you took out by forging my signature at Three Rivers Bank. I let that last part sink in. Emily let out a small sob, her hands flying to her mouth. Jake looked like he was going to be sick. You have 24 hours to sign it, I continued, placing the document on top of the open binder. If you do, this remains a civil matter between us. We go our separate ways, and you spend the rest of your lives paying me back. If you don't, then tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., my lawyer, Tom Preston, will file a criminal lawsuit against all of you for multiple counts of felony fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. All the evidence in that binder, and much more that you haven't seen, will be turned over to the district attorney's office. I paused, letting them absorb the weight of those words. Then I delivered the killing blow. And my first witness, who will be subpoenaed to testify under oath, will be Uncle George. He has already given my lawyer a preliminary statement confirming the conversation he had with you at the party. Complete, utter, dead silence. The name Uncle George was the final blow, the betrayal from within their own ranks. My dad looked like he had been physically struck. He sagged back into the couch, all the fight gone out of him. My mom stopped crying and just stared, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream. Jake and Emily looked at each other in pure, unadulterated panic. The masks were gone. The arrogance, the entitlement, the years of casual cruelty. It all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind for pathetic, terrified people who had just realized their world had come to an end, brought down by the family fool. Get out, I said, my voice low and final. Get out of my house. For a moment, nobody moved. They were frozen in their ruin. Then my dad, looking 20 years older than he had an hour ago, slowly, shakily got to his feet. He couldn't even look at me. He shuffled toward the door, a broken man, followed by my mother, who was now weeping silently, her face a mess. Jake and Emily scrambled after them, not saying a word, their eyes wide with fear. As they walked out, a thought, clear as a bell, came to me, a single line of truth in the wreckage. They didn't raise a fool. They raised a fighter. They just hadn't realized it until it was far, far too late. After they left, an eerie, profound silence descended upon my apartment. It felt like the calm after a hurricane, the air still charged with the ozone of their rage and fear, but the destructive force itself had passed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt empty, hollowed out. I walked over to the window and watched as their 2 cars pulled away from the curb, one after the other, disappearing down the street. It felt like watching a funeral procession for a life I no longer had, for a family that had only ever been an illusion. I collapsed onto the couch where they had just sat, the cushions still warm. I half expected a barrage of angry phone calls, of desperate, pleading texts. I was braced for the next stage of their manipulation. But there was nothing, just a deep, profound silence from their end. That silence was more telling than any shouting match could have been. It was the silence of utter and complete defeat. They knew they were trapped. There were no more moves to make. The next morning, a professional courier, a man in a crisp uniform, arrived at my door. He handed me a large, stiff envelope from Tom Preston's office. My hands were steady as I signed for it. Inside was the ultimatum document. I pulled it out and spread it on my dining table. And there they were, for signatures, scrawled at the bottom of the last page. They were shaky, almost illegible, the signatures of people signing away their power, their future, their pride. They had folded. I read through the terms again, this time as a binding contract. They were legally obligated to begin repaying the debt immediately. The agreement stipulated the forced sale of several major assets within 90 days. My dad's prized fishing boat, a collection of my mom's expensive jewelry that she paraded at social events, and Jake's convertible. The house was next on the list if they failed to meet the initial payment schedule. The payment plan itself was aggressive and would stretch on for the better part of a decade, a constant monthly reminder of their downfall. And the final clause, the one that I cared about most, was the strict no-contact order. They were legally forbidden from contacting me in any way, shape, or form. No calls, no texts, no emails, no showing up at my door. A clean break, enforced by the threat of immediate legal action. The weeks that followed were strange and disorienting. I went to work. I came home. I saw Daryl. On the surface, life went on. But there was a massive hole where my family used to be. It was a toxic, cancerous hole, but it had been a part of my identity for so long that its absence was a physical presence, a phantom limb that still ached. One afternoon, I got a call from Tom. "Ethan," he said, his voice as professional as ever, but with a hint of satisfaction. "Just thought you'd like to know. Your family came into the office today to sign the final transfer documents for the sale of the assets. They didn't look happy." He paused. "Your father tried to negotiate. I told him the time for negotiation was over. Your mother cried. Your brother looked like he wanted to punch a wall. It was all very textbook." Hearing it described by a detached third party made it real in a new way. It wasn't just my pain, my drama. It was a legal proceeding, a consequence of actions. It was justice, cold and impersonal. A few weeks after that, I was driving through a part of town I usually avoided, a stretch of strip malls and fast food joints. I was stopped at a red light when I saw him. It was my brother, Jake. He was wearing the bright green polo shirt and slightly too big khaki pants of a national pizza delivery chain. He was getting out of a beat-up 20-year-old Toyota Tercel, the kind of car he used to mock without a second thought. He was holding a stack of pizza boxes, and he had a look on his face I'd never seen before. Not arrogance, not anger, but a dull, tired resignation. The look of a man who has finally realized the world does not owe him a living. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the intersection. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, then a hot flash of shame. He quickly looked down at the ground, adjusted his branded cap to hide his face, and hurried into an apartment building. The light turned green. I drove away. I didn't honk. I didn't smile. I expected to feel a surge of satisfaction, a jolt of vengeful glee, a sense of serves you right. But I didn't. I just felt a profound, aching sadness. This wasn't a game. This was a tragedy. There were no real winners here, only varying degrees of loss. The final, public consequence for my parents became clear about a month later. I heard it through the grapevine. A call from a well-meaning cousin who didn't know the whole story, just the sanitized version they were surely telling people. Did you hear about your parents? They're selling the house. They said the market is just too good to pass up, and they want to downsize and travel. I went online to a real estate site, and there it was, the house I grew up in. The place where so many fake memories had been made, listed for sale. I clicked through the photos, seeing the empty rooms, the sterile staging. They were dismantling their entire life because of their own greed. That night, I sat down and did something I had been putting off for far too long. I went through my phone and, one by one, I deleted their contact information. Mom, Dad, Jake, Emily. As each name vanished from my screen, I felt a physical weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't an act of anger anymore. It was an act of liberation. It was me, finally, choosing my own peace over their history, choosing my future over their poison. The thick, black binder of evidence was still on my bookshelf, a dark monument to the worst year of my life. I took it down, walked it out to the large dumpster behind my apartment building, and, without ceremony, I dropped it inside. It landed with a soft, final thud, the same sound it had made on my coffee table during the confrontation. But this time it wasn't a threat. It was a sound of closure. I was no longer defined by their betrayal. I was starting to be defined by my own strength, my own survival. The quiet victory wasn't in watching them fall. It was in realizing I had the strength to stand on my own. A year can change everything. It sounds like a cliché from a greeting card, but in my case it was the absolute truth. 12 months after I dropped that binder into the dumpster, my life was almost unrecognizable, in the best possible way. The first and biggest change was my location. It turned out that Henderson, my old boss, wasn't completely without a conscience. After the dust settled, he had called me into his office and apologized, admitting he felt he'd handled things poorly. As a sort of peace offering, he championed my application for a transfer within the company. A senior analyst position, the same one I had been denied, had opened up in our Denver office. With my credit now scrubbed clean and my record stellar, I got it without a problem. Leaving Ohio felt like shedding a skin I had outgrown years ago. I sold most of my furniture, packed my Honda with whatever was left, and drove west for 3 days, toward the promise of the mountains. Denver was clean. The air was crisp and thin. The sun seemed brighter, and the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains on the horizon were a constant, humbling reminder of how small my old problems, my old life, had become. My new job was challenging and rewarding in a way my old one never could have been. My new boss, a woman named Maria, valued my input and trusted my judgment. My colleagues were professional, friendly, and knew nothing of my past. For the first time, I was just Ethan, the talented analyst from Ohio, not steady Ethan, the family doormat and ATM. I was defined by my work and my character, not by a toxic family legacy. But healing wasn't as simple as changing a zip code and a job title. The emotional scars were still there, faint white lines on my psyche. I knew I couldn't just bury the past and pretend it didn't happen. That's what I had done for 34 years, and it had almost destroyed me. So, I did something the old Ethan never would have dreamed of doing. I asked for professional help. I found a therapist, a kind, no-nonsense older woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. In her quiet, sunlit office, week after week, I unpacked 34 years of emotional baggage. It was grueling work. I talked about the constant, low-level anxiety of my childhood, the desperate need for an ounce of the approval that was heaped so effortlessly on Jake and Emily. I talked about the deep-seated fear that I was, in fact, the fool they thought I was, that their contempt for me was somehow justified. Dr. Sharma didn't give me easy answers or platitudes. She just listened, and she taught me the vocabulary of my own life, terms like emotional neglect, narcissistic family system, and scapegoat. She helped me understand that their actions were a reflection of their own brokenness, their own emptiness, not a measure of my worth. You spent your life trying to be good enough for people who were incapable of seeing your value, she told me in one session. The tragedy is not that they didn't see it. The tragedy is that you didn't see it either. It was a slow, painful process of rebuilding myself from the ground up. Some days were harder than others. Some days, I'd be hit by a sudden, overwhelming wave of grief for the family I wished I'd had, the parents I deserved. But slowly, gradually, the weight began to lift. I was learning to set boundaries, not just with others, but with my own negative thoughts. About 6 months after I moved to Denver, I received the first official repayment check, forwarded from Tom's office in a crisp legal envelope. It was for a substantial amount of money. I looked at it for a long time, at my father's shaky, defeated signature on the memo line. The old me, the Ethan who was driven by hurt and anger, would have put it straight into savings, hoarding it as a symbol of my victory, a tangible piece of my pound of flesh. Instead, I walked from my office during my lunch break to a local branch of the Boys and Girls Club, an organization that helps kids in tough situations find a safe place to land. I endorsed the check over to them and handed it to the surprised-looking woman at the front desk. As she handed me the donation receipt, a simple piece of paper, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in years. It was never about the money. It was about justice. It was about taking back my power. And now that justice had been served, the money was just paper. Using it to do some good in the world, to maybe give a kid the support I never had, felt like the final, definitive act of closing that chapter. Life started to have color and texture again. I started hiking on the weekends, losing myself on trails that snaked through pine forests and up rocky inclines. I joined a climbing gym and found a strange satisfaction in the problem-solving of finding a route up a wall, in the feeling of my muscles aching with effort. I found a local coffee shop where the baristas knew my name and my order. A small thing, but it felt like putting down roots. I was building a life, a real one, on my own terms. One evening, Karen, who had become a genuine long-distance friend, was in Denver for a conference. We met for dinner at a bustling downtown restaurant. "You look different," she said, smiling at me over her glass of wine. "I can't put my finger on it. You seem taller." "It's the mountain air," I joked. "But thank you. I feel different. Lighter." I looked at her, my gratitude sincere. "Thank you again, Karen, for everything. You were the first person who really saw what was happening and didn't just offer sympathy, but offered a solution. You were the one who had the courage to follow through," she corrected me gently. "Most people don't. By the way, I hope you don't mind, I brought someone along. A friend of mine who just moved here from Chicago about a month ago." I told her I was meeting the bravest analyst I knew, and she was intrigued. I turned, and Karen was introducing me to a woman named Laura. She had warm, intelligent eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, and a laugh that was genuine and easy. She was a graphic designer, she told me, and had also moved to Denver for a fresh start after a bad breakup and a dead-end job. We started talking, and the conversation flowed with an effortlessness that was completely foreign to me. We talked about hiking, about the trials of navigating a new city, about the mutual pain of being a Chicago Bears fan, about the best places to find green chili. There was no pretense, no agenda. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I was talking to a new person without a shield up, without a part of my brain analyzing their motives, without waiting for the other shoe to drop. It wasn't a thunderbolt moment from a movie. It was something quieter and much more real. It was the simple, profound comfort of a shared connection. When dinner ended, I offered to walk her to her car. "I had a really nice time, Ethan," she said, pausing at her car door. "Me too," I said, and I meant it. "Hey, I was thinking of checking out that coffee shop you mentioned, the one with the ridiculous pastries. Maybe sometime this weekend." Her smile widened. "I'd like that a lot." It wasn't a promise of a happy ending. It was just a beginning. A normal, healthy, hopeful beginning. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly ready for it. A few weeks later, on a bright, impossibly blue Saturday morning, I was driving up a winding mountain road, the engine of my trusty old Honda straining in the thin air. Laura had told me about a hiking trail that led to a place called St. Mary's Glacier, a vast expanse of perennial snow and ice that lingered even in the heat of the summer. She couldn't make it that weekend, but she'd drawn me a little map on a napkin, complete with a smiley face next to the trailhead. I parked the car and began the hike. The trail was steep and rocky, and the air was thin enough that I had to stop a few times to catch my breath. But I felt strong. With every step, with every lungful of pine-scented air, I felt like I was leaving more of the past behind me. The anger, the bitterness, the deep, abiding grief. They were still part of my story. They would always be part of my story, but they no longer defined me. They were chapters in a book, not the book itself. After an hour of steady climbing, I emerged from the dense treeline, and the view quite literally took my breath away. A stunning, turquoise alpine lake reflected the deep blue of the sky with impossible clarity, and beyond it, the glacier stretched up the mountainside, a brilliant, blinding white under the morning sun. It was pristine, silent, and ancient. I found a large, sun-warmed granite rock and sat down, looking out at the immense, quiet landscape. I thought about my family. I pictured their faces, not with the sharp anger of the confrontation, but with a kind of detached, clinical sadness. I saw my father, a man so hollow inside he had to fill himself with stolen money and false pride. I saw my mother, a woman so terrified of not having enough that she sacrificed her own son's future. I saw my brother and sister, two grown children who had never learned to stand on their own 2 feet and had instead chosen to stand on mine until I finally walked away. The biggest realization came to me then, sitting on that rock under the vast Colorado sky. The whole ordeal, as traumatic and painful as it was, had been a crucible. It had burned away the weak, compliant, frightened parts of me and forged something stronger in their place. It had forced me to finally do something I'd never done before. To look at my own life, my own future, and decide that it was worth fighting for. It had forced me to look in the mirror and decide what I was worth. And the answer was more. I was worth more than being a human ATM. I was worth more than their casual contempt. I was worth more than their conditional, transactional version of love. I realized the final person I needed to forgive wasn't them. Forgiving them felt impossible and maybe unnecessary. The person I needed to forgive was me. I needed to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, for accepting their scraps of affection as if it were a feast, for believing, in some small, wounded part of my heart, that their treatment of me was all I deserved, for being the fool they thought I was, for far too long. A real smile touched my lips, not the tight, polite, defensive one I used to wear for years, but a genuine, easy smile that reached my eyes. I had lost the family I was born into, the one that was supposed to be my anchor. But in the process, I had found myself. I had learned to be my own anchor, and that was a trade I would make again in a heartbeat. I took a deep breath of the clean, cold mountain air, stood up, and started walking toward the glacier, my boots crunching on the rocky soil. My future stretched out before me, as vast and bright and full of possibility as the open sky. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a strange and difficult thing when the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your family and your own well-being? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. It helps more than you know.